FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome, and you are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz, and today is a 9/17/18. It's 6 days after the 17th anniversary of 9/11. Amazing how time goes by. It seems like just yesterday that the whole thing was taking place, the attacks, the collapse of the towers, and everything else. Well, got a special guest for you, someone who was there that day, who, as others were fleeing the wreckage and the disaster scene, the war scene that it was, he ran in there, risked his own life, and his name is Commissioner Bernard Kerik. And Bernard, Commissioner, you've written 3 books now. You just have a new one out, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir.
So your 3rd book is out here, and it's really kind of maybe prophetic or maybe not. But the name of the book is The Grave Above the Grave, and it's about another extensive 9/11 plot against New York, against New York City. So where did it come from here? Where'd you get the idea for the book?
Well, I've taken my experience, with the New York City Police Department counterterrorism, living through 9/11. And then in addition to that, I've also worked and lived in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for 4 years. And I worked for the King of Jordan for close to 5. So I've taken all of that experience and created a fictional character in New York City, a police commissioner, imagine. And he becomes involved in a terrorism investigation in New York City that leads him all over the country and around the world. And I think it educates the reader as to what the threats really are today in the aftermath of 9/11. But in the book, the fictional police commissioner, 17 years ago, was a captain in the 1st Precinct where the towers were, and his wife actually died on one of the planes. So it's made for a compelling story. The reviews have been phenomenal. Sylvester Stallone, Brad Thor, a number of others. I'm very pleased the way it's come out.
And so you're writing the book. How hard was it for you to get these words out? Because this is very close and personal to you, isn't it?
It is. It was naturally September 11th. But I think it's something that the American public has to know. We have gotten complacent since the years of 9/11, since 9/11 happened. We get complacent. We get less vigilant. In many cases, people don't want to, they kind of want to forget about it and put it behind them. But I think it's essential for the American public to understand that the threats that we faced on 9/11 and before, things that had happened to the American government prior through the same enemy, they're still out there. The enemy is still there. The threats still linger. And it's essential for people to know how they operate, how they plan, how they communicate, how they train, what their intent is, why they believe what they believe. And the book does that for you.
And obviously, there's still threats. We had that the guy who rode down the bicycle path and killed a whole bunch of people. And we've seen him around the country. Arguably, maybe the attack in Las Vegas had something to do with Islamic terrorism, although we don't really know. But
listen, you've had the incident in New York. You've had Orlando, San Bernardino, Boston, Chattanooga, Tennessee, a number of others. But also there are dozens that the American people don't even know about. They've never heard because these attempts were thwarted by the U.S. government because of our intelligence capabilities, which are far better today than they were on September 11th of 2001. So there's constant threat that the American people should be aware of, and I think The Grave Above the Grave does that in a dramatic, sort of thrilling, riveting way.
And so you obviously you were honored. You honored the attacks this September 11th, and I'm sure it's the same, and yet it's different each anniversary, but now we're 17 years out, Commissioner. And how do you feel? Are the emotions, are they still as real as that day, or what changes?
No, the emotions are always just as real. I mean, there's no time, no day, not in the 17 years since, there isn't a day that goes by that I don't think of that day or someone related to it in some way. On the anniversary this year, I did what I do every year, and that is I met with my staff and the mayor's staff. Mayor Giuliani and I have a dinner every year where we sit down with everybody that was with us in our administration and everybody that was with us on that day that almost died on September 11th. And we all come together and we reflect on the day, the memories of the people we lost, and things like that.
And you did have a close call on that day, you and the mayor, correct?
Well, we had a couple. I was actually standing in front of Tower 2 when the second plane slammed through the north side of the building on top of us. And, you had the plane, the debris, the building coming down on top of us, and we had to get out of the way. And the mayor arrived about 3 or 4 minutes later, and then him and I got trapped inside 75 Barclay Street while he was on the phone trying to get a hold of the White House. Actually, somebody in the White House hung up on him. They said that the Pentagon had just got hit, and they were evacuating. He hung up the phone, and as he hung up the phone, the Tower 2 imploded and came down on top of us.
Yeah, so amazing times. What was the most amazing thing that you saw that day besides the attacks? Perhaps the bravery of some of the people there who knew that they weren't going to come out when they raced into the towers, or there was a good possibility they wouldn't?
Listen, anybody that was there, anybody that was working, all of the first responders, they knew the perils inherent with what they were doing. And I think this is something that your listeners should, they should reflect on. On that day, the New York City Police, New York City Fire, and the Port Authority Police Department effected what I would consider the greatest rescue mission in the history of our country, as they took 20 to 25,000 people out of those buildings in the immediate area, and then they evacuated more than 1 million people out of southern Manhattan into the other 4 boroughs and into New Jersey with the help of the New Jersey State Police. So it's unparalleled. There's nothing ever happened like that in our country. And I think when people reflect on that day in New York City first responders, that's what they should focus on.
Yeah, that was quite an accomplishment. And it wasn't like it was an orderly evacuation, like, oh, there's a fire. It's like these buildings have been hit. They could fall down any second. We got to get the hell out of here. I had a friend in the 72nd floor of the North Tower who, the instant the plane hit, he ran for the stairway just on instinct, and everything was fine until he got to the 25th floor. And then there was, thousands of people getting out of that building.
Right.
And then, the other building collapsed and they couldn't get out of the exit they wanted to, so they had to go walk around. It was a totally chaotic scene. And yet, when you look at Lower Manhattan today, what's been built in its place, the museum, the monument, what do you think when you see that?
I see reflection. I see prayers. I see something that's needed very badly so that we don't forget. The memorial is gorgeous on the outside. The museum is stunning on the inside, but it's extremely it's difficult for somebody like me to go through the museum. They've done such a tremendous job and good job at taking you through that day, taking you through the events that led up to that day, taking you through the rescue. It's extremely difficult visiting the museum, but I think it's something that every American should see.
Every American. And, they rebuilt everything. Well, it's different, obviously, way different than it was, but the amount of money that got spent there, out of control spending to kind of make a point. You think the new structures that are there are a lot safer and less likely to sustain an attack than the old ones?
Well, I think they're better made. I think consideration was given into what happened to us on September 11th in the new buildings that's down there. Do I think that it could ever happen again? I'd say there's probably about a 99% chance it cannot, because of our security in the airline industry, our intelligence. But keep in mind, when people ask me that question, I try to remind them we don't need 4 planes flying into buildings like we did 17 years ago. All we have to have happen is 5 shooters, 5 teams of 2 shooters go into 5 cities on the same day at the same time and assassinate a bunch of young children. And I promise you, bin Laden used to call for spectacular attacks like September 11th. That would be a spectacular attack.
Yeah, that's really, really disturbing. So there's no way to become invulnerable. We're always subject to some threat. That's the problem, I think, why people have become complacent.
That's exactly right. And that's why in the grave, above the grave, it was important for me to make people understand the various threats, the various targets these people may have, and how they communicate, how they wait us out. They have enormous patience. And they plan and they just wait. And the more complacent we get, the less vigilant we get, the more it's going to come back to haunt us.
Right. So, and I want to also emphasize the advancements that were made in policing during the Giuliani administration, and you were a major part of that, both in corrections, where you totally brought order to a completely chaotic sets of jails and prisons, and then going to become police commissioner. You know, the historic advances made in fighting crime, which it appears we've gotten complacent there, and the current administration of the city has forgotten all about it and thinks panhandling's great, fair beating, we don't need to send them to jail, and handling your bodily functions on the street is totally acceptable. I mean, what's going on here, Commissioner?
I don't know. Look, Giuliani was of the mindset that nobody is going to come to live, visit, work, or go to school in an area where they do not feel safe. So the primary goal for a chief executive of a city like New York City or Chicago or Baltimore, the primary objective is safety and security. The primary objective is to make an environment, a society that's, abides by law and order, and people feel safe enough to build businesses, to create business, to create jobs. And, many cities around the country just have, they've lost sight of that. And they're now stuck in these poverty, socioeconomic, just violent, murderous communities, and nobody's doing nothing about it. So don't tell me it can't be done. I did it.
Yeah.
Don't tell me it can't be fixed. We fixed it. Mm-hmm. So I don't know why people don't follow the renaissance of New York under Rudy Giuliani.
Yeah, well, they make excuses why it wasn't, why you people, the leaders, weren't responsible. Oh, it was a demographic shift. The cocaine, the crack epidemic was ending anyway, and that's why the crime there's less young black males out there to commit crime. A lot of it was racist justifications for your success. So
well,
one thing,
you know what? I try to ignore all the garbage. If you weren't there and didn't experience it, and I did, as a cop, as a foot cop in Times Square on a foot post in uniform, right up until the time I was police commissioner, I was there. So don't give me all the other garbage about who, how, why. It can be fixed. We fixed it, and these other cities that refuse to do anything about it, Chicago, for one of the most violent cities in the country right now, they're in a position where they're constantly complaining, saying it's the poverty, it's the socioeconomic stuff, it's the racial divide, it's the cops, it's everybody under the sun. But they're not talking about the violence. They don't address the black-on-black crime. They don't address the guns and the murder. You know what? Nobody's going to move there and build businesses and take you out of poverty if you don't reduce the crime and stop the murder.
You're so spot on. And one thing I've been my own personal crusade, and this is something you had to deal with both as a commissioner of the Department of Corrections and police commissioner, is we've got this homeless problem. The left would like you to believe that it's because the rent's too damn high, but the reality is we've got mentally ill people on the streets who need to be institutionalized. We have drug addicts and alcoholics, and yes, we do have economic casualties who can use a helping hand, but most of the homeless problem is due to those three things: alcoholism, drug addiction, and severe mental illness. These people need to be institutionalized, don't they, Commissioner?
Well, they need to be institutionalized. And ironically, we've turned into a society where we believe that the only resolution for any of this stuff is prison, jail. Mm-hmm. So a guy with addiction problems, alcoholic problems, homeless, they want to lock him up and put him in jail. No, that's not jail. That's not what jail is for.
No.
Under Giuliani, we had major homeless issues when Giuliani came in, and he said, "Look, if they're mentally ill, you get them to a clinic. If they're sick, you get them to a hospital. But they can't just lay around on the streets of New York City, and it's dangerous for them." One time, a short story, in Christmas Eve in 2001, there was a number of homeless people on the streets of New York on 55th and 5th Avenue, and I ordered my guys to move them, get them out of there, and I had a priest from a Catholic church tell me it was okay to keep them there. I said, no, you can't keep them there, because tomorrow it's 26 degrees. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to have reports on my desk that somebody froze to death laying alongside your church. And I had them moved. And when I had them moved, the church sued me, the ACLU, Legal Aid. I forget exactly who was involved in the lawsuits, but I was sued because I moved them there. Eventually, I won the lawsuit. But just have some common sense. You cannot leave homeless people out in the streets, especially when they're mentally ill or they have alcohol problems.
Yeah, for sure. And it brings out the worst predators who prey upon those people. And look, they either can be helped, right? They can either be helped, successfully treated, some portion of them, or they can't be. In which case, if they can't be, they need to be permanently institutionalized. But our whole society has repudiated long-term supervised institutionalization for people who cannot take care of themselves.
I agree.
Well, you were a breath of fresh air to New York when you were Commissioner of Corrections and Police Commissioner. I know you had a lot of challenges in your life. What really impresses me about you is, hey, I don't hear any bitterness. I don't hear any anger. You've gone on with your life. You're doing amazing things. You really are an inspiration.
Well, listen, Sylvester Stallone once told me, use the things negative in your life. Use those things that, are inside you, the anxiety and the pressures, to use those as fuel to get to your next destination. So I don't look back. I look forward. And I use everything that's happened to me to try to help society and help this country. So thank you.
Done a great job. One final question. Looking back on your long career, putting 9/11 aside, what do you feel your biggest accomplishment is? And I'm not just asking that standard question, but I think there's something you've done that very few of us know about that we need to know about you.
I think one of my biggest accomplishments was Rikers Island, really. One of the worst, most violent jail systems in the country, and taking it from the worst of the worst and turning it into an international model for efficiency, accountability, and safety. I think that, along with my time as an undercover narcotics in the NYPD, in which I oversaw one of the most substantial drug investigations in U.S. history, and wound up in the jungles of Guatemala, Costa Rica, Brazil, Ecuador, and Colombia. So I've been around. Yes,
you have been around, and you really need to go and get this book. It's must reading, The Grave Above the Grave by former Police Commissioner Bernard Kerik, and it's your third book. and I'm going to go back and look at your other two books because I find your life quite fascinating. And
thank you,
you've
sir.
been so open and transparent about everything that's happened in your life that you are an inspiration to many. And hey, I can't wait till your fourth book, Commissioner.
We'll see. Thank you.
Hey, and you find the book obviously wherever fine books
Amazon,
used to be sold.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, fine books stores. Get out there, get the book. I think you'll enjoy it.
Hey, and one final question: do you have a website we can go to?
Yeah, I'm all over social media. They can find me anywhere. Just plug my name into social media and they'll find me.
All right. Hey, and we really appreciate you coming on. Hey, any questions or comments for the Commissioner, myself? Email us, kl@kerrylutz.com. Great luck on the book, Commissioner. Wish you the best.
Thank you.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.